right. So basically, I picked a few different hands that were interesting. Charlie, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm totally.
All right, then. Let's see what you got. This is a kind of special hand because it seemed quite straightforward, but the small blind has just been eliminated. So we have a single big blind. I mean, big blind posts the big blind ante, so the small blind is missing. And now Lun is raising off a 20 BB stack. And I'm in middle position and I'm second in chips and I have eights. So first of all, maybe his strategy, some ideas around that with the single big blind, and then also my response. Those are the two interesting points here. So maybe this one I'll spoiler already. I think the first thing where people will make mistakes here is maybe not playing this too wide, but like definitely never play this spot too wide. Like probably people open raise pairs too much. So like, I mean, eights is pretty close already. So like just generally playing this spot pretty tight. Like there's just not so much to gain. So that's the starting point. But now if we start with that, what I wanted to see as well is like, okay, how do we react to this 13% raise first end range? I mean, generally one thing that's interesting, it's probably not so applicable in this particular spot, but the thing that's very important in these type of spots is like as a general rule of thumb is think about what the worst hands are that he's open raising and then folding. Because these spots are very sensitive to like blocker and unblocking effect. So if, for example, he's open raising, you know, offsuit 10x, you don't want to have a 10 in your 3-bet folding range. Or if he's raise folding like 10x suited, like all of them as well, like just 10 gets even slightly worse, right? So I think that's very important. Like generally what you will see is you want to take the hand basically that's unblocking the most, but still has the highest possible equity. So between ace 9 and ace 8, you probably want to have ace 8 more than ace 9 because he raise folds king 9 suited, for example. There were some answers, very different directions, no flats. I think you can play a flatting strategy, but it would be minuscule. Generally, if you want to flat, then probably 8s and 9s are hand categories that you should think about and consider. But the main hands are really those hands that dominate some of his hands as well and play just very good post flop. Ace Jack suited is probably the best example, yeah? If he's opening King Jack off and Jack 10 suited and Queen Jack suited. And also those suited aces, right? Like Ace Jack suited is just this prime hand that just dominates everything that's folding if you 3-bet. Basically, if you build a flatting range, it probably kind of builds around like King Queen suited, Ace Jack suited, Ace Queen suited also quite interested in that, and then Ace 10 suited maybe less so, but could also be in there. And then you can have some pocket pairs, but those are more, I think, kind of frequency filling ups rather than anything else. Even sometimes hands like King 5 suited are good 3-bets. It depends on the spot. Sometimes if he goes all in with all Ace X, then it's not that great to have King X, then you're just blocking the value part of his range with King X. But King X also blocks quite some value, right? We block kings, we block ace king. Yeah. That can be helpful, but it's really dependent on if, for example, he goes all in with all suited aces, it just becomes slightly less relevant. But if he doesn't, then actually King X functions quite nicely.
I got a pretty interesting question here. Like, I think I've never seen this under a gun player before. So if you assume like, hey, you kind of have some edge against this player, then what would you do in this kind of spot? When solver told you to mix and call and folds?
I mean, it depends on what that means. He doesn't have experience, right? Like, for example, sometimes it could actually be that you want to play tighter. Because if, for example, it's a player that maybe cares less about ICM and plays more, like plays a tight range, but then plays that range more aggressive post-flop, then actually you don't realize that much equity. If you play against a player who then is like very, very scared, you know, they only bet if they have it and check fold if they don't, you realize much more of the equity. So sometimes you are in those spots where you play against players that don't really understand the implications, and then suddenly actually you wanna kind of avoid playing thin spots against them because they just put too many chips in the middle. I think probably the strongest argument to make is how often they 4-bet jam. That's probably the strongest argument. Because often weaker players, they don't find the 4-bets. And that is mainly the main argument, I think, to make for example, widening your 3-betting range. Ready for the second?
Yeah, let's go.
We have 7s under a gun, which is 7 left, yeah? And I open raise and Seth 3x 3-bets. So first of all, maybe do you want to start with what should I open? I spoiler already. So folding suited aces, no. Yeah, like I think what you said is slightly too tight, probably.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
I think you were quite too tight in the suited kings. I probably also opened Jack 9 suited, King 10 off, Ace 9 off, and then Ace 8 off, Ace 5 off. I make a bit dependent on the table. So now, okay, it's his reaction already. This is very hard to ask about, but basically I think the major thing here is to just put on quite a lot of pressure. It's probably also what a lot of players are missing. Like finding the right frequency here to, like, I would say you should probably hit at least 10% 3-bet here. And most players probably 3-bet more like 7 or 8%. I think as long as you find roughly the right direction here, that's very important already. A really big difference between a mid-stakes and a high-stakes player is here. They are not very close to this. The flatting is also then important. Like, you don't have to flat 6-4 suited or 3-5 suited, but like 7-8 suited is quite important. You realize just really good equity. So it's just quite important to understand the dynamic of the spot and mostly find the 3-bets and general VPIP. So if you VPIP here like 26% and 3-bet like 10%, that's very fine too. It's also quite important how people approach the spot, because ICM will, I think, put more pressure on me than how I will play it. Like, I don't think I'm under as much pressure as ICM would dictate. So it's not like I will play super passive, because the thing is also, if I double against Seth, yes, there's a lot of risk premium. But if I double against Seth, basically, like, I'm running over the table. Now, UTG reaction against Cutoff 3-bet. I would play the spot a little different now, but I think the point is, like, it's fine to be a nit here. I personally think that these shoves here are not optimal. I think that it is better to induce more here. I mean, with these ICM calculations, you want to induce less. I personally think that it's better to induce more. So ace king suited and kings, like, I'm basically always inducing. But I think what's generally important is, like, also ace queen off, like, I'm not folding. And also sevens, like, I folded in game mostly because of this particular spot we are in. Like, Seth as the chip leader, like, an extremely good position for me. But one thing you mentioned ace 9 suited. I think that actually in these type of spots, that hands that kind of are hit or miss are quite valuable, right? So if you have sevens, for example, the hand plays quite straightforward.
I kind of want to ask, like, why would you say, like, you want to induce a little bit more than solver does? Because solver, obviously, because our risk premium is so high, so we kind of don't want to induce kings and ace king. But you say, like, you kind of want to induce more. Is it because, like, you think they're gonna 4-bet, 5-bet bluff more or something like that? Where is it coming from?
Not necessarily more. Think about it like this, right? So let's say you look at a model, okay? And let's say the model looks at, okay, let's say Seth goes all in with suited aces, a certain amount of the time. And then the model calculates the ICM value, and it looks at the outputs and is like, okay, if you 4-bet kings and he jams suited aces, he still has, a bit over 30%. And then we're like, okay, the model is saying, okay, this is worth this much, and if we go all in, we're like, he folds way more often and we only get called by queens plus, basically. If that is the case, then the model is attributing more dollar value to the jam, because, like, oh, it's so bad if we get it in and lose, and it's only so good if we get it in and win. And what I'm saying is, even if you put it at the exact same percentages, so if Seth is going, same percentage if he's going all in, same percentage of ace suited X going all in, I'm saying that the value that the ICM model is attributing my chip stack when I double, I don't agree with that value. Because I will have 100 big blinds and there will be 6 stacks with like 15 to 30 big blinds. I'm probably going to be chip leader for an average of, I don't know, 30 hands or something. So ICM is not calculating this future game. This is maybe one of the takeaways of this session. This is a very important aspect. Like, the general tendency right now is to play these spots too tight. And I'm very, very certain about this, that we have to play the spot more for chips than this. Slightly more calling, slightly more 4-betting, like more inducing. So what that means is your passivity in position is even worse. because the majority of players is just playing too tight. So make sure that you find the in-position aggression. Ace-8 off in the cutoff, Dimitar Danchev in the small blind. I'll just spoiler the cutoff first in. Kind of similar to before, yeah. King 10, Ace-8, sixes, any suited ace, like King 7 suited type of stuff, yeah. Small blind reaction, I think I'd spoiler this one as well. He should have small sizing with the absolute majority of his range, some all-ins, some larger sizing, but the main sizing is like around the 4 BB mark, 4 to 4.5. I think that's quite a nice sizing from him. Now, what am I supposed to do?
All right, let's go again. No flatting. I'll just play pure 4-bet shove and fold. I think I'll jam a pretty linear range here.
Yeah, how do you get to your 4-betting range? There's a concrete reason. Like, why do you have to go linear?
I think just like I said before, I don't want to play post-flop with low SPR.
Yeah, it's not the reason. I mean, the main reason is if you face a linear 3-betting range,
yeah,
especially when the SPR is so low, you will have to go with a linear shoving range. So this is like very much just purely math, where it's like, okay, you know, he 3-bets quite linear, not super linear, but quite linear. And then when he 3-bets linear and we're quite short, then against a linear range, we just have to find the exact, there's no like, yeah, okay, you know, like polarized leaning. It's just literally, okay, like it's just numbers. It's just, okay, he 3-bets this
enough
much,
equity in
and then this hand has enough equity, or this hand doesn't have, and that's like there's like a very clear line which hand has it and which hand doesn't.
Wow, that's surprising.
What surprises you?
Actually, shoving quite a ton, more than I thought.
So,
and we actually have flat in range. That's very cool to see.
It's a similar phenomenon than before. There's basically 1 or 2 hands that just really benefit. Especially also, if you think linear, there's basically always, like before is also, open raise is also always linear, almost always. Unless you get very short, right? So we see the same phenomenon there. There is basically 1 or 2 hands that are like right where if you raise, they fold worse and call better.
Yeah.
And you see the same phenomenon here.
Yeah.
And for certain hands, this is beneficial, and for others, it's not. So when you have so low SPR, sometimes this is for aces because you just want to keep hands in. And then almost always it's for suited aces as well, where it's like if you raise ace-5 suited plus, for example, ace-9 suited, it's always kind of the middle, right? Like, or leaning towards the middle. Where if you go all in, like you basically isolate yourself against better, and if you call, you keep in worse. Yeah? So the linearity is the important part. All right. Dimitar Danchev opens cutoff, gets 3-bet by Seth. So Dimitar has 30-something BB, and Seth is chip leading as like 35. And then there's Nick with 36, and I'm short and small blind short. So cutoff opens, maybe something like that, and then button reaction. I mean, obviously not the button reaction that is being played. So what should I 4-bet? I'll show you the range. I actually think this was one of the mistakes I made on the final table. My in-game thoughts, and I'll run you through a little bit. I think it is fairly clear here that you have to go something along the lines of, I thought it would be somewhere along the lines of ace, queen off, ace, jack suited eights. And again, everyone who's posting in the chat, and if you don't really know that they're on the same line, then make sure you know that. Yeah, it's kind of like hands function in the same equity buckets, basically. Yeah, so it's like ace queen off eights, ace jack suited, or like ace queen off, ace jack suited nines. It's a bit depending on your opponent range, but they're always kind of in the same bucket. Yeah. In my thought process, I thought that Seth would go more equity driven and less polarized. And now basically I was thinking, okay, like how does that change my range? Because if he has more 8-9 suited and less like ace-6 offsuit, or like just generally less ace-x, because I think he's supposed to have a lot of ace-x here. How does that change? I think I made a wrong adjustment here. I think ace-queen is just very clearly a shove. If I have something like ace-jack off, like I probably always fold, and I think that's fine, and I probably just go something like, I mean, for sure, 8 plus ace-queen, ace-jack suited, and then think with like ace-10 suited and ace-jack off and sevens.
All right, next one. Let's go.
Yeah, let's
Move
do
on.
it. All right, I'm in the high jack under the gun, 5-handed basically. And it's interesting here, actually. Fabi solved this one, and he solved it for a bigger open size with the big blind being short. I think I went for a 2.5x, and I actually really like this idea with a hand like ace jack offsuit. So my idea here was that there's still some room also, like it reduces flats by quite a bit, because if it goes flat, big blind can go all in basically, and the pot is reopened. And it's kind of the optimal size, I thought, between like raising big and charging him the most possible and having the opportunity to reopen a pot. So I quite liked it. Now, big blind defend against 2.5x. So purple is all in, which is just extremely linear. The rest, fairly tight. I mean, VP-IP like against like a UTG range. All right, 3 left. So small blind strategy. All right, now this one is going to be very difficult. So, Charlie.
I think the first thing I would think is like, do we have a flat in range here? With this stack, probably not that much. I probably would play like mostly raise, all in, and folds strategy.
Charlie, you said almost no limping. Why is that? Do you think just like, what do you deal with, for example, pocket queens?
I'll raise probably 2.5 maybe.
What would you do with 7-9 suited?
I think I'll jam. You can fold out better, dominates combos. So it'll be like the medium part, I will just jam.
And what do you do with 8-4 suited?
Raise fold.
And what do you do with Queen 8 off?
Queen 8 off. I think I'll raise fold as well.
Okay, I think it's enough. I think this is a good example of logics are really important. Like, it seems that you try to memorize things more and then like pull from your memory.
That's true.
Yeah. But I would really challenge you also to really try to understand, because it's going to be much easier to summon a structure of a range if you understand the dynamics better. Because here, generally, what I'm assuming from what you said is that you play this spot based on ICM, where there's probably more than 3 players left. And you looked at something like similar stack sizes, but now it's like 4, 5, 6 players left. Play much more for Chippy V in this spot here. Like, there's a lot of ante in the middle, right? I'm not sure if you have considered this, but obviously this is a very different sim if you have a big blind ante and you're 3 left. There's like a lot of money in the middle. You want to VP-IP as much as you can. And then basically there's like 2 big forces here, yeah? And the 2 big forces are basically, one, we want to push him off a lot of equity paired with value. And the other one is realizing as much of the pot as we can. So the 2 ideas here around limping a lot, just because we call 0.5 big blinds and then there's a 3 BB pot. Yeah, so very little BB for actually a pretty big pot. And that's why we want to limp a lot.
But I'm curious, what if like 3 players, they have like similar stack? Do you think that's going to change?
Yeah.
Anything?
Yeah, of course. You will play more cautious.
So do we still play like a limp all-in strategy?
You will probably still have some limps, but you will just want to VP-IP less, basically. Because basically, think of it like this. On a very simple level, the best way to explain it is like, okay, how much do you have to gain to play for chips here versus how much do you have to protect to not bust? And in a spot where the button has 17 big blinds, you have more to lose by busting, basically. Which means a hand like 10-5 off, which mainly just wants to fly in there to like realize, you know, a percent or 2 of the pot. Now it's like, okay, you know, we don't need to VP-IP this hand, so we're going to fold this hand. And if we fold more, because those fringe hands, these bottom hands, are less interested to VP-IP, now suddenly that changes as well. So if we VP-IP less, there's less trapping. All right, ace-4 suited. So one thing that's quite interesting here is the moment you start adjusting this to what people actually jam, you will play really tight in the spot. I would probably say that anything that's like plus 15, like plus 0.15 or worse, I fold against almost anyone except like strong pros where I know they shove correctly. Because the absolute majority of players do not find the weak jams. All right, you ready for the last hand?
All right, let's go.
Heads up with big blind ante, and we have 10 big blinds. Are you ready?
Yes, I think you have to VIP it almost 100%, and we have quite a lot of limping. Probably play a limp and all-in strategy, and this hand category are always limp call.
When we try to go with logic, I think these pillars will just really help you break down faster. So basically, the main thing, what you will see here is, obviously you can go all in with a lot. Yeah, we know this because there's a lot of chips in the pot. Basically, what you will see is, as you mentioned, we will VP-IP almost 100%. We will probably not VP-IP, let's say, maybe the bottom 5% or so. And now we have to find the right balance between all-in and weak VP-IP. And we are in a position where we will probably have a good enough range to select quite well. And when we can do that, then we just take basically the best hands to do either. And that actually leads to our range looking very structured. So what you will see is in this particular spot, like if I try to think about it, then I would see, okay, I VP-IP probably 95%. And I think what will help you is if you visualize it, it's okay, there will be a cutoff on the suited side. And the cutoff on the suited side will be what are all the suited hands that we can limp and then call. Everything else we jam. And mostly what you will see is that it's a bit like almost in one line. Yeah, you will see, okay, like let's say suited sevens. So everything to the left of suited sevens, we're going to limp and call. And everything to the right, we're going to shove. And then maybe there's something that's like slightly too weak that we're not going to shove. And we're going to call that again. Like maybe, 8 deuce suited, limp that again. So there's like this little thing on the side where we limp that. And then all the rest there is shoves. Like king 6, king 7, yeah, that's going to be close between limp and shoving. But like 8, 9 suited, we limp call. And, so it's like you have to slide. And then if you shove like, maybe like 7, 8 suited is a limp call as well, or like, maybe 7, 9 suited or like 7, 10 suited is a limp call. But if you shove that, that's not going to be. So as long as you establish this line where, okay, you have all the hands to the left basically are limps and all the hands to the right are jams that are like fine, decent enough. You identified that. So now from this already, you have this part solved. And now the offsuit part is also even easier. When the offsuit part, basically anything, like there it's looking like this. Anything that's strong enough is a jam almost basically up to the strongest hand. Any ace, any king, any queen, and then jack goes to probably like, that's where the curve starts. Like it will probably be something like maybe jack 5 is a limp, and then you will have the curve continuing, and those are your limp folds. And that's basically the whole thing. And if you then like one hand off, like in this direction or not, it's not going to be terrible. If you jam a bit more of the suited sevens, like and play the spot a bit easier rather than like limp call 10-7, that's not going to be a problem.